Video games are pretty freaking epic, I'll tell you what. There are some truly wonderful experiences out there, and a lot of games I really wish I would have played much earlier, like Omori, One Shot, Deltarune, Resident Evil 2, Alone in the Dark, the new Nightmare for Game Boy Color. You know, that was an experience. And sure, it's probably the most lukewarm take you'll hear all day, but these games, other than Alone in the Dark of course, are each great in their own right. Some I end up replaying quite often. I've played through Deltarune way more times than I'd like to admit for one, and others I haven't finished yet, so it's always possible that I'll end up changing my mind on a few of them later on. Meanwhile, there's something that I'm neglecting, and you know how the old saying goes, if you forgot it, it's probably not that important. In this case, it's based on the kind of person you are, because I'm referring to backlogs. If there's anything a lot of gamers have in common, it's degeneracy and having more games than they can count, but only having played about half of them. Look man, I'll play a Persona game eventually, but maybe whenever I can make playing 100-hour RPGs into a full-time job? I mean, come on, this is just ridiculous. Suffice to say, I think backlogs are kinda cringe. There's a lot of games you'll find that you want to play or games you've dropped that you want to come back to, but there's most likely multiple reasons for why you haven't. For me, it usually comes down to a lack of time. Like I mentioned, there are a bunch of RPGs I want to try, but the problem I have with a lot of AAA RPGs is something most of them share, being incredibly freaking long. I already have a hard enough time getting into shorter RPGs. It took me about half a year or more to come back and finish Omori, and that's a pretty easy RPG compared to the likes of Xenoblade, Shin Megami Tensei, Nier Automata, and many others, from my understanding at least. I don't want to turn this into a big old rant about RPGs, but to keep it simple, I am terrible at strategy games. You give me this big list of skills, classes, and characters to keep track of, and ask me to brew up my own unique team strong enough to defeat any upcoming bosses, and then we have a recipe for the 5-star dish that is Burnout. In other words, it's so good that I don't feel like playing any RPGs at all because of it. Now yes, Mr. RPG Fan 2004, not all RPGs are a huge time sink. That's why I think it's best to ease yourself into the longer titles by starting off with a 10 to 20 hour RPG. I really do want to try Xenoblade because I've heard great things about the series, but with the amount of commitment it requires, I gotta make sure to finish some more in-depth RPGs before it, so I'll know whether or not I'll really enjoy it. I think that's why I kinda love some of the Mario RPGs, mainly the Mario and Luigi games, but Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle is pretty fun too. The Mario and Luigi games all follow a similar gameplay structure, and you'd think that would get boring eventually, but they're one of my favorite series of RPGs because of that familiarity. Jumping into games I don't know much about though, that's kinda different. And that leads into another reason why I often ignore my mini backlog titles, the daunting nature of it. It's not always because a game is really long. More often than not, I just look at all of the games I own and think to myself, where did I go wrong? How did I let this happen? But gosh darn it, I have to buckle down and play Sega Bass Fishing one of these days. I didn't buy the Dreamcast bundle for nothing. I think the Steam summer and winter sales are a pretty big culprit for a lot of the backlog titles I have too. Like, there's a lot of games I got on sale months ago just because I was thinking to myself that if I didn't get it then I probably wouldn't get it later on, and here I am all these months later still not having played most of these games, but hey, I still saved money, that's okay. Money that I probably should have spent on something I knew I would be playing soon, but the deal I got on Suspect Enemy was so good I couldn't pass it up. I swear I'll play it soon. I'm still playing Splatoon 3 and I haven't even launched any of the games I got on sale. I'm slowly deteriorating from the inside out and my house has been repossessed due to my bad spending habits. I crave the sweet release of death, but I just need one more win and I'll be satisfied. I never got to play Suspect Enemy because my friends just laughed at me and declined, but that's okay. I have nothing left, so there's nothing more I can possibly lose. This right here, this is exactly what I'm afraid of becoming one day. Obviously, I don't think ignoring your backlog games is going to lead to your untimely demise. That's what we here in the industry call exaggeration. Although I do legitimately think I have a spending problem, these sales always come up at the worst times, like right whenever I already bought something else. Steam, please, just hold off on the sale for a few months so I can get my life together, please. I promise I'll buy a game and play it this time. It's just so tempting to buy a game I have wishlisted knowing I'll save a few dollars on it, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be on sale. Sometimes new games I forget about come out and I just suddenly am interested in getting the game, and it's like a domino effect that will eventually lead to complete disaster. This sorta goes hand in hand with what I was saying earlier with regards to the daunting nature of my backlog, but another issue I have a lot is getting in the right mood to play a game that's new to me. At the beginning of the year, I told myself I really did want to try more new and unique games, but I just can't seem to buckle down and give something else a shot. The amount of times I've booted up Steam or my Switch and thought to myself, yeah, maybe now I'll try playing something different, only to instead opt to play something I've already played way too much is just, it's kind of staggering. I already know I enjoy the games I've played a bunch, but what if I don't enjoy the new thing and I just end up wasting my time? I think having a few bad experiences with games is what often gets me stuck in this mindset. But I'm tired of feeling this way. I'm constantly struggling to get that little bit of motivation to work on content, and having that lack of motivation bleed its effects into my free time spent playing games just sucks. Believe me, there are a ton of games I would love to try out because I think they would really broaden my horizons, like Resident Evil Village, BioShock, Little Nightmares, Ori and the Blind Forest, and that's not even scratching the surface. But whenever I can't even dedicate myself to finishing a game, I really don't like to add on more to my pile. And yet here I am, doing exactly that, but oh, boo-hoo, stupid idiot loser cries about not being able to play a few more video games, woe is me. No more of this. I am done feeling like this. I'm done playing the same few games every week. So you know what? I dedicated myself to finishing or at least starting a few of my backlog titles despite what I feel about adding more to the pile. So you know what? Let's talk about them. Rapid fire style. As a fairly moderate fan of the Sonic series, one game series I've had my eyes on for quite some time now is the Spark the Electric Jester series. Right off of the bat, you can see the inspirations, but after the first game it becomes a lot more distinct. The original game is nothing special in my opinion, not bad but not great either, although I did think the idea of Kirby type abilities was pretty neat even if I wasn't big on them. Spark the Electric Jester 2 and 3 though are where things get particularly interesting, making a big shift from 2D to 3D, fast-paced platformer action, but the kicker here is the combat. The alternate abilities from the first game return, which again is a neat idea, but in execution I just don't really like it at all, really. Maybe I'm just not understanding something here, but it just comes off as a whole lot of button mashing, which isn't at all helped by the bosses just standing in place, waiting and allowing you to attack them. Fortunately, I didn't feel like it was a big enough issue to really bother me until the third or fourth boss though, because in regular levels the combat is completely optional. Whenever you get to that boss though, it goes from being super simple button mashing to a ridiculous difficulty spike. I'm sure it's still doable, but at that point I was kinda ready to skip over to free to see if anything changed much. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's pretty much more of the same. Great platforming, although I did like what I played of 2 more. I didn't get super far into 3, but 2 had some of the most fun, fast-paced platforming I've experienced in years, giving you plenty of control and alternate paths to explore for replayability, hidden goodies, and speedrunning action. I do want to give 2 and 3 some more playtime soon, as despite the lackluster combat, I enjoyed my time with both of them greatly, and if you're looking for fun platformers like Sonic games, Spark the Electric Jester will be right up your alley. Metroid Prime Federation Force was one of those weird games Nintendo released back in 2015 to 2016 with a similar premise to The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. Up to 4 players link up in local or online co-op to take on several missions based in the Metroid Prime universe. Now, I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to anything Metroid related, but I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this game. At launch I wrote it off as a stupid sounding spin-off that probably wasn't very good, but earlier in 2022 my brother and I played through it and it's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. It's far from a great title. I mean, it is an FPS on a handheld console, so the game doesn't control the best, and the campaign is dragged out a little too long. Not to mention that the final boss is just plain stupid. I mean, come on, you're gonna mind control Samus Aran, but have her crawl around the ceiling in ball form instead of jumping around shooting missiles and freeze rays? Really comes off as a rushed finale. That being said though, the game genuinely does have some fun moments earlier on in the campaign. For example, there's a few missions where you have to guide a payload cart to be loaded on this ship, but the storm from Fortnite occasionally passes through, meaning you have to stop here and there at these small shelters, while also fighting off space pirates along the way. I also really enjoyed the few stealth missions there were in the game. Ironically, I wasn't huge on the combat since, you know, it being a 3DS FPS game and all, you have to constantly rely on gyro aim correction. It works, but I just didn't find it as fun as hurting big ice creatures or sneaking through a space pirate base. The Resident Evil series is one that I'm not sure how to feel about. I've played quite a few of the games at this point and have mostly enjoyed my time with them, but I never think much of them past being just fine games. Despite that though, I still like to try another one of the games every so often, with my most recent romp in the series being through Resident Evil Village. Now, I never played Resident Evil 7, mainly because I've already seen a full playthrough, although at some point I'd like to give it a chance for myself as I've heard it's one of the best in the series. Village interested me a lot more though, so I decided to try it out first since I somehow went a year without getting anything spoiled on it. Resident Evil Village picks up 3 years after the events of RE7, where Ethan Winters and his wife Mia have moved to Eastern Europe to lay low with their daughter Rose. This peace doesn't last for long though, as Chris Redfield invades the Winters' home, orders his men to kill Mia, and then takes Ethan and his daughter away. Things expectedly go wrong and Rose is kidnapped by a woman named Mother Miranda, and what ensues afterwards is a lot different than I expected. Early marketing and some discussion of the game later on would have you thinking that Castle Dimitrescu was where most of the game took place, that is, until you find a flask that turns out to have Rose's essence inside, at which point the game takes a slightly more open-ended approach. This is something I came to love and hate about the game. The village is without a doubt one of the best areas in the game, both visually and from a gameplay standpoint. Like any other RE game, Village rewards you handsomely for exploring every nook and cranny of each of the game's areas. Random treasures and gems are hidden everywhere, with the bulk of these being hidden within the village itself, making for an incredibly fun pseudo-hub area that you'll constantly come back to throughout the game and find new treasures in. However, I can't quite say the same about the other areas of the game. Don't get me wrong, Village was a great experience, but that's on an initial playthrough, and for a series that usually highly encourages replayability, RE Village doesn't quite hit the mark in a few areas. Now I know you're probably all going to collectively groan as soon as I mention this area, but the dollhouse is a freaky part of the game, but once you know what to expect, this entire area boils down to walking around and solving a few fairly basic puzzles. Then there's a few bosses that drag out, like the second boss, which has an obnoxious attack that hit stuns you, and he froze up every 2 seconds. I don't know why they had to make some of these bosses damage sponges, but let me just tell you, I did not appreciate it. There's still plenty to love about the game though. For one, this game has the most enjoyable gunplay I've experienced in the series so far. I loved how pretty much all of the weapons felt. I especially felt the power in the Magnum for once, which made me feel pretty freaking cool. Aiming was somewhat of a trouble at first though, since the enemies will duck and weave to avoid gunfire frequently, but that made it all the more satisfying to slowly improve and start blasting your way through them. Initially, I found myself annoyed at many of the game's action segments, but looking back on it, these are some of the best in the series, constantly keeping you on your toes and testing your abilities, and the same can be said for most of the bosses. Although some bosses lasted a little longer than I would have liked, nothing quite matched the feeling I got after finally taking them down. Heisenberg, for one, was such a great boss. It's a shame Ethan doesn't get many on-screen interactions with him though, for how fun of a character he is. Another largely enjoyable part of Village was exploration, like I mentioned earlier. There is so much extra stuff to do in Village, and even some extra entirely optional bosses to fight, and I loved that. In a bizarre way, Village made me feel like I was playing a collectathon platformer when I was just exploring the areas for secrets. Overall though, Village gave me the best best blend of exploration and combat, and the finale of the game was incredible. It gave me an experience nothing like what I was expecting, so it's a shame to see the game be held back by some weaker elements that make it difficult for me to want to replay. However, I still love the game despite my grievances, and I'm sure whenever I get the time I'll enjoy the DLC as well. It just disappoints me that it took me this long to finally play the game. Pikmin 3 is not the topic of this section, but it's one of those games I could replay 100 times over and still have fun with it. However, I never got around to playing the first two games, and considering Pikmin 4 is now on the horizon, what better time to catch up than now? Pikmin, the original game, is one of those games I really wanted to play as a kid but was too afraid to try because of one of its standout mechanics, gimmicks, whatever you want to call it, the 30-day timer. The game follows Captain Olimar traveling through space to get back to his home planet. However, because he literally just did not care, he rams straight into a meteorite and crash lands on a strange planet. Seriously though, if anyone's gonna try and defend him in the comments, the dude could see the meteorite coming from like a mile away and he didn't even try to swerve away from it. Dude just didn't care. Unfortunately though, upon entering the planet's atmosphere, his spaceship, the Dolphin, loses 30 vital parts that'll allow him to return home safely, and coincidentally, he also has 30 days to escape before his oxygen tanks run thin. So getting back to what I was saying a minute ago, the 30-day timer seemed pretty stressful, and that's what kept me from playing the game as a kid. As it turns out, I was kinda right about it. You have a pretty limited amount of time to explore an area of the planet each day, just enough to get one part every day, which you pretty much have to do to stay on track, which isn't super difficult, but you do have to plan out your days pretty well. Honestly though, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Without the timer being so limited, the game really would lose something because you're constantly forced to come up with strategies to locate and bring parts of the ship back to base. Oh, and I forgot to mention, to do this, you'll have to utilize the abilities of the Pikmin you come across. However, doing this can be a little easier said than done because if there was one big complaint I had about Pikmin 1, it's that Pikmin management can be super annoying. To explain briefly, Pikmin are these little creatures that'll follow you around and you can use them to fight off various creatures and then carry off their bodies to base to grow more Pikmin, or have them carry back parts of the Dolphin. Pikmin also come in different colors that have different abilities. Red Pikmin are resistant to fire, yellows can be thrown higher and can pick up bomb rocks, and blue Pikmin can breathe underwater. What makes managing them so annoying, however, is that they'll often just do whatever they feel like. For example, if you happen to walk through some blades of grass, any Pikmin that brush against the grass just decide to start plucking it for nectar even if you didn't command them to do so. One of the most annoying things though comes whenever you need the specific ability of one color of Pikmin, because whenever you have all of your Pikmin following you, you can't individually select a certain color to throw. This means that you'll have to separate all of your Pikmin and then whistle the specific group you need over to you, and sometimes even if you're whistling at certain Pikmin, they just won't listen and you'll have to whistle them over a second time. It might not sound very annoying, but these things can add up somewhat quickly, and personally they get on my nerves quite a bit. Despite all of that though, I really can't help but love this game. It's super fun to strategize and put your Pikmin to work, seeing them chip away at gates and bring back more ship parts to open up new areas for exploration. It is somewhat stressful knowing that if I mess up a single day I'll be off track and likely not be able to make the 30-day time limit, but it also makes your accomplishments feel all the more satisfying. It's definitely janky here and there, but Pikmin is much different from a lot of other games Nintendo had to offer in the GameCube era, and it sticks out as one of my new favorites. As of writing this, I'm still playing through the game, but I'm looking forward to finishing it and then finally seeing what Pikmin 2 brings to the table, because Pikmin is really underappreciated by Nintendo, but I'm so freaking happy that they're even making Pikmin 4, and I can only hope it's just as fun as 1 and 3 have been for me. And that's it. It's not much, but you know what? I'm really glad I at least tried to clear off some of my backlog titles. Like I said at the beginning of the video, there are some wonderful gaming experiences out there, and it's a shame I've put off playing so many of them for so long. But if there's anything that I've learned, it's that it's okay to have a huge backlog of games. I think it's great to always have something else you want to try out, because I love being able to jump from one game to the next, chipping away at it, even if I often do it at the pace of a snail skateboarding on molasses. Forcing yourself to try new things often works for me, but sometimes I'm really not in the mood, so it's fine to take it slow. In other words, this is my way of coping with the amount of money I've spent on untouched games. I'm Wyrlwind, and dang it, I didn't even play Sega Bass Fishing!